So hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Ella, and we should have Penny join remotely. And yeah, last year on BlinkOn 17, we talked about some changes to the PWA install criteria. Now I just like to give an update on how things are going and the other changes we are working on. So yeah, firstly, or some background, what is install, why install is useful. So yeah, I copied most from the Penny slides last year. So install gives the website more opportunity to blend in the operating system. We can it will get the persistent storage. It gets the uh, gets an icon, the launching surface, and you can use some like operating system feature like share target and icon badging and all uh, uh, other stuffs like in summary, beside all the cool things we can get from using the web, installed PWA can get some addition from the OS, making the whole user experience nicer, smoother, and easier to use. And historically, we have a list of install criteria that a website needs to meet to be able to install. So first of all, it needs to be secure, so it has to be HTTPS, and it needs a web app manifest with shortening, uh, icon, and star URL, because we need to know what to install, right? So and it also needs a service worker with a fetch handler to provide offline experience, and we uh, last BlinkOn, we announced that the PWA will no longer require service worker to be able to install. So this one is gone. And with that change, we see a big jump in the user-initiated PWA installs. There's more than 60% increase in desktop installs and 15% increase in mobile PWA installs. We also see that there's a the distinct host user install PWAs on are increased 30%. So there's that tiny jump in the back there. And so cool. And so in addition to that, in the near future, around the end of this year, we will be getting rid of the manifest requirement. And so I just mentioned that we need the web app manifest to know what to install. It was pretty much the source of truth we use to identify the PWA, right? And how can we install a website without a manifest? Mm, Turns out we already have a tons of information we get uh, from the website itself, from the well, we have a tons of web feature that give us such information. So uh, for example, we can get an app name for page title, and we get the style URL from the origin, and we get the icon from the favicon or any icon the link tag element can provide. And central addition, some additions. So one caveat is that if there's no manifest or style URL is not specified, we will restrict the install capability to the root of an origin to avoid a scoping issue. And although our goal is to make all page installable, installability can be disabled by the developer by having a manifest and setting the display mode to browser. So in addition to the basic information, we absolutely in addition to the basic information we absolutely need to install, we also looking into using the page info using the other web feature to improve the install PWA experience. For example, we can use the meta tags for the scene color. If the website has defined a scene color with the HTML meta tag, we can and of course it doesn't have a scene color provided with the manifest. We can assume that this scene color is the the color a website want and use that color for the same color of the install PWA. And similarly, some website use the meta tag for dark theme support, the color theme, and also together with the CSS element. That's something we are looking into to use to improve the install PWA experience. There are a lot more. I couldn't. I There's no way for me to know every web feature that. So there's a lot more to explore here. So please let me know if you have any idea to make the install PWA experience better. And yeah, of course, promotability. So we want to acknowledge that the installability is different from promotability. We have a few ways to promote a web app, including before install event, and the browser prompt is the messaging UI, and the navigator install feature that we are proposing. That's just to know that the installability is not the same as promotability, and we may have a different set of criteria for a website to be able to promote in addition to the installs. So yeah, another topic I want to mention here is the difference between install and shortcut. You may have seen these two terms in the Chrome Android overflow menu. Install app and add home screen, it has been brought to our attention that people are confusing about these two terms. Well, especially on Android. Sometimes it's install a standalone app. Sometimes they add a shortcut that opens in the browser tab. And yeah, we know that this is quite confusing. So we, with the change of the install criteria, we want to draw a clear line between installs and between what is installs and what is shortcuts. So I want to share a very early mock of the change we are planning to make. So this is something we are planning. On the installer side, we want to give user the option to either create a shortcuts to point to a page or install the Silence app. For example, here on this create shortcuts option will create a shortcut that opens in the browser tab. This install button will instead install a standalone web app on the user's device. For example, on a cooking recipe website, the app shortcut web user can use this app shortcut web option to save the current recipe, and they can use the install option to install the site in as an installed PWA on their device on the home screen, and they will have access to all the recipes. So yeah, and over to Penny. Is Penny online?
Thanks so much, Noah. I just want to call out a distinction here between what I call sort of do-it-yourself versus crafted apps. So as we move towards making any page installable, this is a distinction that we'll want to reinforce with users through UI in the browser. So with the do-it-yourself case, we want to use phrases like install this page as an app. And here we still want to use the word install because this is going to be a standalone experience. It's launched from either the home screen or say the start menu on Windows or another launching surface of the operating system. But we do want to emphasize in the UI and strings that this is do it yourself. So the user may be asked to name the app, for example. So there'd be a dialog where the user could change the name of the app. We might pre-populate that with the page title. Or of course, if there is a manifest, but it's incomplete, we may use the app name from the manifest. But we're going to use a minimal UI mode when we render this, and we're just going to be reinforcing to the user that this is something that they chose to essentially build themselves from whatever parts were available. In the case of a crafted app, this is the app experience that we know and love today. And in this case, if the app has an icon, we know that that's part of the criteria for achieving promotability. It has a name. In this case, kind of example, a pancake app. And these things are not going to be customizable by the user, at least for the perspective of the install journey. Once installed in the operating system, on some operating systems, you might be able to rename the launcher icon, but the app effectively has a name. That name is specified by the developer. And if the developer has also specified a display mode, that display mode is respected as part of the install process. So that's the distinction that we want to draw. And it's the reason why I think that this is an important one is we want to preserve user concepts around quality of experience. And so we want to give them a different set of expectations about the experience that they may receive based on whether or not this was designed to be an application, or whether or not this is essentially something that they're choosing to install as an app on their own, and build themselves. So those are the two distinct terms. Obviously, DIY and crafted apps are a distinction that's more of an internal thing. Is we're not going to be exposing these terms directly to users. Users will be exposed to them indirectly in the differences in the experience that they get. One of which being that they have to do a bit more work, like name the thing before they create it, or see that it's more directly associated with a web experience versus a fully standalone application that was built and designed by the developer to run in that standalone mode.
Thank you, Penny. And any questions?
Thanks for the presentation. I'm wondering if you heard any feedback from web developers, what they think.
Penny, do we have any feedback from developer?
Yeah, because we haven't rolled out the full universal install yet, we don't have direct feedback from developers on this. It's one where I'm interested in what developers' perspective, and we definitely one area that I'm concerned about and actively listening for is any developers that are concerned that this is diminishing the quality of their experiences. But we very much would like, as developers see more users install pages that were not previously installable, that they capitalize on the opportunity to essentially create better installed experiences.
Hi. Besides the number of installs, what other metrics are you going to consider with the change?
Happy to take that one as well. So of course we are looking at install rate, but another metric that we're considering as a guardrail is what is the I would call it essentially the regret rate. So how many times do we see users install but then never actually subsequently launch that installed app? So we're concerned that are users confused by the change? Are users installing things that they don't actually use later? That would be an indicator that we either need to do more in the UI to help the user understand what's going to happen, or that the UI is too prominent, and we need to find some way to make it less salient for the user if users are making the wrong decision.
Yeah. In addition to what Penny said, we are also looking into uninstall rate and time spent in the installed, launching the standalone mode, and also the distinct hosts that I mentioned earlier. How many different websites are using the installed web app overall?
Apologies if I missed it, but just confirming all the changes that you were talking about for being able to install by default applies to desktop and not just Android?
Yeah, it applies to both desktop and Android. I work for Android mainly, so my example are mainly for Android, but our desktop team is also working on making all sites installable in Q4 this year. Thank you.